what's your worst experience in haunted houses? Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Please enjoy some spooky stories about haunted houses and the dangers that lie beneath. Story 1. I'll begin by saying I'm personally more on the side of a skeptic frame of mind with any paranormal experience. But enough things have happened in the last year to at least question that and entertain the possibility that this is legit and not just my daughter's active imagination. These events have occurred only in the house my husband and I bought in June of 2017, which was built in the 1920s. First, in October of 2017, I was laying her down for bed in the dark, with only moonlight lighting the bedroom. She pointed across the room and asked, "Mom, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something she could be referring to, but saw nothing. So I asked, "What guy, honey?" She responded that he was right there and gestured toward the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked her what he was doing, in case I could put together some recent episode of pretend play or a toy she'd commonly talked about. She said he was hiding. I asked if he was scary. She said, "No, he's hiding." Creepy. During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper. Not scared. What made it strange was that she was 2 at the time and didn't really engage in pretend play or storytelling at that point. And as I mentioned, no toys were in sight. From there, we just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named That Guy. This is the umbrella name we generally use for any other episodes or weird stuff that happens around the house. That guy is pulling a prank. Next, in February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed along with her then 6-month-old brother. We were doing the usual cuddle-up night talk, when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed. Just me and you and him and her." My skeptic mind would argue that he could have easily been her little bro, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely mentioned him, and he wasn't included in any of her talks that we were having. What really was strange? Was she? Who's she? The only other female in the house is our cat, and she wasn't in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in bed with us, and none were in the vicinity of her bed that she could have been talking about. A little later that spring, a new name came into conversation, Mr. Longneck. Short backstory. My daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's when she's playing. We can't really explain it other than kids do weird stuff sometimes. And it started before we moved into this house. Anyway, she was getting put down for a nap and she was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck-grabbing thing and suddenly she did a little tougher than usual, but not enough to hurt, and said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck. Mr. Longneck." I'd never heard her use this name and it isn't a character in a YouTube or Netflix show she watches. So I asked her who Mr. Longneck was. She just kind of giggled it off and was asleep 10 minutes later. This is when I started getting creeped out a bit by her stories. In April of 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents, and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There had been a fire in our house in 2009, which we knew about, and which no one was hurt. During the renovation after the fire, the owners at the time found a bunch of old stuff in the walls and included it with some pictures of the fire and a couple newspaper clippings. Among all the old stuff was a pack of pearl buttons, some store catalogs from the 1940s, and a small notebook with some handwritten pages inside. I presume that these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names inside as well as the home. After all this, my husband and I are suspicious that if there is something paranormal going on, maybe these objects are keeping some energy here or something. I know this is long, but we're almost done here. In about October 2018, I was driving to my mother's house with only my son and daughter in the car. Along the way, my daughter, now 3, asked from the back seat, "Mom, is that Grandpa?" I said, "Where?" She pointed to the empty front seat and said, "Right there." I told her Grandpa was at home as he had just recently moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street or sidewalks for her to point at either. Now, there have been some minor other events that have happened, but these were the biggest ones to describe in detail, and I received advice to engage her further in conversation when it comes up. While we have to an extent to encourage her to be comfortable talking about it, I never pushed in order to avoid leaving the conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would just offer just to appease the conversation. One day, though, and a few times after, I just decided to ask her about it. Below is a brief detail of what she has said in roughly the past month. Me: "Can you tell me about that guy?" My daughter: "What guy? You don't remember that guy?" "No." "What about Mr. Longneck?" "Oh, yeah." Her face lights up. "Can you tell me about him?" And various other questions lead to, "Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears monster clothes and a hat. He's nice but also scary. He says trick or treat, but doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away and goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs. She says he comes to our house at nap time, which she no longer has, but was generally the afternoon. He knocks on our big door, the patio door, and walks through the kitchen. These were her exact words, and while she was telling me this, was pointing a path from the front door to one of our living room windows. I asked what he says or does, and among a few things, she mentioned he played in the kitchen with her with a spinny cow toy. This is one of those Fisher-Price pull string farm toys. She never plays with it. I rarely see it, and I've never seen it in the kitchen. The specific details of this piqued my interest for sure. I had also asked if he had ever brought a friend to see if I could follow up on the her mentioned earlier. He brings a friend. She's a little girl, not a grown-up, and has yellow hair like me. She's never scared of these talks, although she withdraws from the conversation when I ask about his neck and why it's long. So that's pretty much it. Thanks if you read the whole thing. I welcome any comments and advice. We have saged the house, but quite a while ago, and plan to do it again. I think we will probably also get rid of the old items from the walls after we find out more about them, which is sad because it's the home's history. Looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. I don't know about you guys, but part of me is thinking not to get rid of the items if they were already in the house, just because you don't know which one the ghost could be tied to, and I feel like you wouldn't want to accidentally make him mad. But also, if this kid is young enough, then maybe she just has an imaginary friend. I think I would say it's fine for now, but if she gets older or she starts to get more violent, definitely consider having someone come check out the house. Story 2. My house was abandoned for 2 years before we bought it. When we went for the viewing, there was a bedroom closet that was padlocked shut. Think barn door latch with a lock through it. Realtor said they had no key and we couldn't open it unless we bought it. Well, we ended up buying it, and priority number 1 was opening that door. After a few minutes with a pry door, we get in to reveal a child's play area. Bright colored walls, glow-in-the-dark stick-on stars, and planets covered the ceilings. Checkered tile for the floor. No lights, no air vents, no windows. My little brother chimes in, but this must be where they kept the kids before they died. Fast forward through 3 more renovations to when we move in and our lives there. The loft area has a daylight sensing, motion sensor light, as there's no easy way to install a switch. The light comes on by itself all hours of the day, no matter what way we position the sensor. It randomly trips and we jokingly shout out, "Will you darn kids quit running in the house?" That's usually the last time it comes on that day. A year into living there, we have turned the creepy closet bedroom into our computer room. We leave for work at the same time each day, but arrive home about 2 hours apart. I got a call from a very confused wife one day asking why I'd come back home after we had left together. I did not go back home. Upon returning from work, she was greeted by our computer room chair in our kitchen. The chair had to travel through 2 doorways, down a hallway, and a flight of stairs to reach the kitchen, seemingly by itself. We thought it odd, but blamed the dead kids. Those hedonistic kids. About 6 months after that, we had our last big doozy of an event for a while. We go to bed one night in a house in perfect order. Upon waking, we find that all of our kitchen knobs have been removed from the butcher block. In their place, all of our butter knives. The sharp, dangerous knives have been placed behind the kitchen sink instead. Neither one of us had moved them. We both were pretty freaked out and spent the whole day away from the house trying to sort it out. We decided we were being unreasonable and went home to forget the ordeal. Those aren't real, and they weren't actually the kids who died there. Talking to the neighbor one day, and he confirms that no kids died in the house. A grown man had. The room with the creepy closet was the room where the previous owner's brother committed suicide. When his wife left and they failed to work it out, he couldn't handle life anymore. He committed suicide. The previous owner kept living there afterwards, but upon finding out he was foreclosed and attempted suicide in the same room. His children found him and he lived. Later that year, a family grows. The rooms all get shuffled to make room for the baby. That creepy closet room gets emptied. The weird things all stop happening. To this day, 9 years later, that room is only used for storage. My 4-year-old son plays in there occasionally, but even in daytime with all the lights, the window lets into the playroom. He turns every light on. When asked why, he just said it makes it less weird to play there. Story 3. I lived in a haunted house for 10 years. I had 5 kids while living there. Every one of my kids saw the man in the hat on the wall, and they all saw him between the ages of 2 to 5. My kids turned 6 and they stopped seeing him. Once I heard my son screaming for me in the middle of the night. I went to him. He was 5 and he begged me to make his drawers stop. I said, "Stop what, hun?" And he said they kept opening and slamming shut. "I can't sleep because it's so noisy. Things get moved all the time and lost all the time." The spirit did not like babysitters and would torment everyone. The most violent episode was when I let my 15-year-old brother watch my kids. We got home around 2 a.m. and found my brother sitting on the steps in the hallway between the front door and the kids' room. He was shaking and crying. He said that when he got the kids in bed, the pounding started everywhere all over the house. At one point, it was so bad he went outside to see if there were people outside hitting the house. There was no one there. He had gone out the back door to check. When he walked back inside, he saw the reflection of someone in the mirror. walking up the steps to the kids' room. He went running, thinking that someone snuck in when he was outside. He checked everywhere and there was no one in the house. But when he was upstairs, he saw a shadowy figure streak around the corner of the steps. He heard the front door open and shut. He went running down the steps, but the door was closed and locked. He proceeded to spend the next 3 hours chasing the shadow and hearing the doors open and close. He never babysat for us again. No one would. I had lights shatter above our heads, and my children would laugh and talk to people in their rooms. We had neighbors call us at all hours of the night asking if we were okay, because they saw gangs of people in our yard and sneaking around our windows. The cops got so used to getting the same 911 call that they stationed a cop in the back of our house to watch our house between 2 and 3 a.m. There are so many more scary stories, and the nightmare side living there was definitely scary. We moved, and the people that moved in after us stayed for a month. They said it was too scary. The house has been vacant now for 8 years. I was seriously about to say by the end of this story, if OP doesn't get the hell out of that house, then I don't know what they expect to happen. I think I would have tried to move probably after the first 2 kids started seeing stuff. This doesn't sound like the first story where the ghost seemed to be relatively chill. And while this ghost seems like he wanted to protect the kids, he was still hurting everyone else who came into the house. Good on you for moving OP, but it was kind of crappy if you didn't warn the family that wanted to move in there. Story 4. My parents are divorced, and my mom always used to talk about my dad's house. We had the back room. This is middle America, a super small town, less than 200 people, and kind of crappy houses. But my dad's house was a super old house with an addition. The new addition was the back room. My dad always kept it sealed off. It was full of boxes and it had a bedroom attached. The back room was awesome as a kid because there was so much stuff back there. Boxes full of old toys, papers, weird crap, fishing lures, books, set all stuff that had been stored. My mom would always tell us that she put her guitar back there and would always hear it being strung at random times. Day or night. It just sounded like someone was running their hand across all the strings. We always had really minor weird crap at that house, but nothing that would make me say there was an issue 100%. Footsteps, the occasional bang. Stuff being moved could have been anything. I'm closer to 11 or 12 now, when I decide that since nobody is using the back room, it should be mine. The bedroom, gigantic living room. Oddly enough, my dad agreed. But it was later at night, so I moved a mattress on the floor, determined I would set up the room as my own the next day. I went to bed that night on my mattress on the floor and woke up super late in the night. It sounded like 1,000 birds in the room all flying around and smacking into walls. Or like 1,000 hands all over the walls smacking the walls, including a foot or so above my head. It went on for at least 30 minutes once I put the blankets over my head. Finally, I mumbled, "Let me sleep tonight, and I'll sleep here again," and it stopped. I didn't say crap the next day. I was terrified, but I was also scared of being left at. The day passed, and at night I was freaked out, but still scared to say anything to anyone. So I started to go back to bed, and my dad opened the door and said, "There's something back here bothering you. You don't have to sleep back here." I immediately got up and slept in another room. Story 5. In the 90s growing up, my brother and I slept in the same room. No TV. Just a window we could see out that we usually left the blinds open to have light in our room. I slept on the side of the window and my brother slept on the other side of the room next to the closet. Both of these happened when I was in grade school. My brother woke me up crying and asking what happened. From what my brother says, he woke me up and saw me get out of bed and walked to the front of the room where a lady had her arms open to hug me. Lady was sad and just had her arms wrapped around me. After what seemed like a few minutes, I walked back to my bed, stared at him after I pulled the covers up and closed my eyes. That's when he had woken me up. I was scared poopless, not knowing what was going on. He said he was too fixated on me walking back to the bed that when he snapped out of it and looked around, she was gone. We both huddled in my corner, scared to make a sound and opened the windows to get some noise in. Another time he had some of his buddies sleep over and I hung out with them before turning in for the night. They were in the basement and I was in our bedroom on the second floor. All of them came to my room in the middle of the night and told me to stop scaring them. I told them I was sleeping and hadn't moved since getting in the room. They said that someone kept pulling their hands down at the door that leads down to the basement. And once they would get to the stairs, I would already be running back up the set of stairs to the second floor. Once again, I was scared poopless. I had to talk with my parents because some of my brother's friends thought I was still messing with them after the night was over. I also had some of the kid stuff on seeing tiny men in shadows or on the ceiling, or shadow people when it was pitch black with no lights. I can't blame the brother and his friends for suspecting you of that kind of stuff, because that is like key older sibling crap. It's just part of the deal. But seeing the ghost lady is definitely odd. Maybe if OP had scared them once, it could have been sleepwalking. But the repeated occurrences makes me think that something else might have been going on. Story 6. I lived in a big 1840s colonial house with 3 of my friends for a while. It was set back in 80-plus acres of state wildlife property, and it was a gorgeous house. The bedrooms were all upstairs and all lined up down the hall. Our third night in the house, right about 30 minutes after we'd all sort of called it a night, my doorknob rattled like someone was fiddling with it. Then I heard the door next to mine rattle, and the next, and the next, all the way down the hall one at a time. The next morning, one of my housemates asked why I was messing with the doors. Since she asked the 2 guys in the house and neither of them knew what she was talking about. One night, I woke up with an intense urge to get out of bed, like my brain screaming at me to get up. I had laid still for a while thinking maybe I'd been woken up by a noise. It was around 3 a.m. and dead quiet. I went into the hallway, and as soon as I walked out into the hall, all of my roommates opened their doors and came out too. We were all woken up, but no one heard anything, and they had the same urgent get-up feeling like I did. We just shrugged and went back to sleep. Weird things would happen there. Strange objects would show up in the basement or crawl space, like an old suitcase or a kid's rocking chair. Once a vase. Just random stuff. You would occasionally hear footsteps running down the bedroom hall and down the stairs if you were in the living room below. I could go on. That house was really strange. Never felt threatened, just weird. Story 7. When I was 3, my family moved to an extremely small town. The house was built in the early 60s and is your typical ranch style. I'll be the first to admit that I was an extremely weird, morose kid. Think Wednesday Addams without homicidal tendencies. Anyways, I didn't have a lot of friends except for the man in the attic. He was very sad and his skin was burned. He didn't like many people, but we were friends. I'd talk to him and sometimes we'd play. It creeped my mom out, but she assumed maybe I'd seen a nightmare on Elm Street and was imagining the burnt man. Years went by and we stopped playing, but I'd always felt something. A few years later, as an adult, we were visiting with new neighbors who happened to have ties to the community. Somehow, the subject of imaginary friends came up and my mom enthusiastically told the husband about the burnt man. He looked really serious and informed us that the land our house had built on was the site of an old blacksmith shop. The blacksmith had accidentally caught on fire and later died of his injuries. Needless to say, I felt this in my soul. After a little research, I found out it actually did happen. I'm in my 30s now, and whenever I stay over a visit, I do have a feeling of being watched. I've had a lot of paranormal experiences, but this was the first. If the burnt man is still there, I'd like to think we really were friends. This story was honestly strangely endearing to read. I always like the stories where kids are interacting with ghosts who aren't malicious in any way. Just people who happen to be sad and stuck wherever they happen to die. I think if I were a ghost, I would be like this. Just kind of chilling in the attic, hoping no one would bother me. Story 8. Many different things have happened, but this one sticks out the most. It was my mom who had it happen, not myself directly. Backstory. The house we lived in was photographed in the 1860s in a book in the local library. It was shown to be one of the first houses to have a radio and some sort of headphone device on top of someone's head. The story is, I go on my merry way to school one day. My mom is home alone cleaning up after breakfast not too soon after I leave. So she's doing her thing when she begins to hear music upstairs. She starts to think to herself that I had left the radio on. She's pissed because we're poor and try to save every penny we can on our electric bill. She gets to the top of the stairs, which has an open railing. She looks to the right, and there's a pair of legs standing there tapping their feet to the music. She didn't even stay to look up for a body. She noped the duck out of there as the music stopped and the legs began to turn to her. My mom made me sleep with her for like a week. I was 15 at the time. I've had numerous experiences in that house, though. It made a skeptical, big, burly construction worker with sun-kissed skin turn pale as a ghost. That crap is no joke. Story 9. As a kid, I would make stupid videos with my friends, and sometimes I'd like to rewatch them and cringe at our shenanigans. Quite recently, I rewatched a video of a friend that I made in 8 o'clock at night. The video consists of our usual ducking about a hallway through the video. There's a short 2-second clip wherein my friend is flailing a toy sword around and screaming in my room. My friend is sitting with his back to the open door. A dark figure is seen walking down the hallway past the open door. The figure is only visible for a split second. But there is no doubt something passed by. The thing is, I remember vividly being home alone that day. My father always told me a guy burned to death in that hallway, and my mother swore she sometimes heard coughing at night. I remember the hallway always smelling faintly of smoke, even though no one in my family smoked.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.